Hello, Secretary. I was just wondering if you had any insight onto what's going on in Antrim County. It's a very staunchly GOP area, and the numbers were surprising, and it could lead to quite a flip if there's some mistakes there.
Well, I'll let the pundits and the people looking closely at the data and the results of different elections make those analyses. I'm truly just focused on myself, as I advise a lot of folks to do, just blocking out the noise and focusing on the count.
Cox pointed to a software issue in Antrim County. It showed Biden had the majority of votes, but in reality, Trump won the county by several thousand.
And these counties that use this software need to closely examine their results for similar discrepancies.
The Trump-Biden 2020 election vote counts in 4 counties in the state of Michigan. Benny's been a computer programmer. He's an avid software engineer, well adept at it. Phil, you went to Clemson. You're also an inventor and engineer. You guys have seen this.
The blue dots are precincts, so.
In the normal case, if you look at this, if the center line, the red line, is Republicans, okay, straight line, because the reality is that anyone who voted Republican probably voted for Trump. So if you look at all these precincts, they should hover around 0, right? Would look like this, right? In this a situation where Trump is more liked than Republican Party candidates. We have a graph here, which is one of these graphs. There's hundreds of precincts here, okay? So every blue dot is a precinct here. And what you're seeing is, as you move from left to right, which means the left is low percentage of Republicans. So these communities over here on your left are low percentage of Republicans. And as you move to the right, higher percentage of Republicans demographically. Now, what's fascinating on this graph is common sense would dictate that as you moved across, you shouldn't see it go down. What this is saying is, for example, if you look down here on the bottom right here, this is a community that 80% of, or 75% of the people voted straight party Republican. More importantly, if you look at this data, it's not scattered. It's a beautiful line. Let's look at the closer at this. So if you just look at the left part of this, so I'm looking at less than 20%. So these are communities, precincts, where they're less than, you could argue, 20% demographically Republicans. And if you were to draw a line, an average, you see it's around 7%. So in this case, in those communities, even though they're not Republican, could be Black communities, minority communities, working class communities, Trump is more popular than other Republican candidates. However, if you look in communities as Republicanism increases, Trump's votes go down. And they don't just go down in a random way. If you draw this beautiful center line, they go down in a very linear way. As more, as precincts have more percentage of Republicans, Trump loses more percentage of votes in a linear fashion. Right, all the way up to 20%, you see he was getting close to 7% more votes than his other Republican counterparts. But for some reason, which we'll talk about, right at 20%, it looks like his vote counts start getting linearly reduced. And if you look at this curve, and I've looked at lots of curves, Benny, you've seen a lot of these curves, Phil, right? Any one of us who's in the pattern analysis business, when you see this, it's immediately, if you look at these, you say something's up, okay? This is too structured, right? Too perfect.
Yeah.
What is that, Benny?
Too perfect.
Too perfect. In fact, it's highly unlikely. We in data analysis, pattern analysis, if you're a in AI, you look for features like these because it lets you build, an algorithm, right? This is easy. So this beautiful curve hits flat and boom, it drops in a nice linear fashion, as though an algorithm was there. As you went across, votes were getting cut by Trump. And that's what we see here. And remember, we've talked about it. The election systems, going back to Diebold, right, Benny? They have the feature of being able to manipulate vote counts from one person to another. It's called the weighted race feature. So you see it here. Now, is it only in Oakland County in early voting? Well, let's look here. Here's election day voting. Look at this pattern. Same thing. It's around 7%, and boom. Okay. On a different time. The reason this is important is this is in one time period. So temporally, we're going to look at temporal, which means by time, and spatially. So temporally, we're looking at one event before election day, early voting, and this is after early voting. You see the same feature. The net of it is what you find is this truth, which is an orange, that 10% of the Trump votes, if this was down here and it should have been up here, were given to Biden, and 200 votes were taken from Trump. Phil Evans, he did this for every precinct, and he found out when you really bring Trump's votes, what we think the pattern should be around the straight party vote line, you find out about 20,000 votes were taken from Trump and 20,000 votes were given to Biden for a 40,000 Biden lead. This only in Oakland. By the way, Oakland is one of the biggest counties. And by the way, I want to put both of them together. You see that in this, when you add it all up, 60,000 votes increased Biden's lead, right? So total of 30,000 votes were reduced for Trump and 30,000 votes were increased for Biden. So Biden's margin increased by 60,000 votes. All right, so that's Oakland County. Now let's look at a different county. Again, spatially, we're going to a different place and a different time, early voting, Macomb County. Here there were 28,000 votes. 14,000 were taken from Trump, 14,000 were given to Biden. And what do you see here? Well, in this case, Trump actually does even better. He's almost at, what does that look like? About 12%, Benny? 12%?
12%.
And then here, this kicks in around at 25%.
Yeah.
Okay, but same sort of slope to Macomb County on election day. Okay, same feature. You see, in fact, he's doing really good here, up to 22%. Right, Phil? That's what that looks like. Yep. And then again, it drops precipitously when right around here. Okay, but same feature, same algorithm is in place. By the way, when we say same algorithm, it can be weighted for populations, et cetera. Now we look at, again, the same thing here. So total, when you look at Macomb County, a total of 16,500 votes were taken away from Trump. By the way, these are minimum. And 16,500 votes were given to Biden. So a total of 33,000 leads. So if you take 33 plus 60, we're up to 93,000 votes between Macomb and Oakland County. Now, we want to look at Kent County. And Phil, when you generated the state, I believe you combined both early and election day, so we have all of it together. And here you see nearly 45,000 vote margin for Biden, which means around 22,500 votes were taken from Trump, 22,500 votes were given to Biden. And what you see here is a 45,000 margin. And again, in these communities, which are more Democrat communities, Trump's doing well. And then again, the algorithm kicks in and Trump's votes start getting eaten. And what's fascinating about this is here's a community which is nearly, if you look at this precinct right here, that's 85% people who came in voted Republican, and Trump's down by 25%.
You could even make the argument that even if you want to believe that Republicans hated Trump so much, the larger that the population size were, they still wouldn't be able to hate him in such a perfect line.
Exactly. This is the important point. So we'll come to this in our conclusion. But people like Mitt Romney have said, well, generally Republicans are still Republicans, but they got tired of Trump, right? But you wouldn't see it in this beautiful linear straight line. It would be like a cluster, and we'll talk about that. We have a fourth county, which is Wayne County, predominantly Democrat, okay? And what you're going to see here is something quite alarming, but also spectacular, is this graph. What do you see here? Isn't this fascinating? Wayne County, in fact, it looks like at least this algorithm was not applied. Maybe they did other stuff, and we're not going to even speculate. We want to take a scientific approach here. But what you see here is, look at this. when you put the Trump line, it looked like Trump was doing 10% better. Now, these are predominantly Detroit. I would say, Benny, would you say predominantly black communities?
So
Trump is actually doing better. He was actually doing better. And there was some evidence that a lot of the people in the black community were moving away to Trump. Maybe not to Republican voters, but to Trump. And you see that phenomenon here.
The other point, Shiva, is you could see that you could establish some real upper and lower control limits here because there is the presence of a line, but with the other ones, it's going straight down. There's no such thing as an upper and lower control limit.
From Wayne counties. Let's start with this. You see the city of Detroit, right? City of Detroit, the precinct. So what do we have here? Keep in mind you have registered voters at the top there. Here, I will show you registered voters at the top. Then you have cards cast, voters cast, and percent of turnout. So percent of turnout is based on registered voters.
Right.
To Livonia, very white. Livonia, we have 79%, 80%, 84% turnout rate, 85% turnout rate. These are crazy turnout rates, by the way. That surprised me in and of itself. So Detroit, we only have of the precincts, 17, an average between 10 and 20%. And now in all the surrounding suburban areas, hard Trump country, Livonia, Grosse Pointe, we have the turnout rate. And we have total turnout rate 84%, 84%, 82, 82, 82, 75 is the lowest we see there, 83. Even if you look at the in-day voting percentage, they're all between 25, most of them between 25 and 30%. Some of them are absentee ballots, but you see a higher voting percentage by quite a significant margin, right? You see a voter turnout rate of 80, 85%, 75%, which should tell you that that is an absolute blowout for Donald Trump because these are hard Trump areas. Now, look, let me do this. I'm going to continue scrolling through here because these are all part of Wayne County. And then something's going to surprise you because we thought we were done with Detroit, right?
Right.
But then we get to the bottom here and all of a sudden Detroit comes back. But do you notice something? 0 registered voters, NA, as far as percent of vote turnout. 0 registered voters, and by the way, these are much bigger than the precincts before, 2,500 votes, 1,900 votes, 2,100 votes. Some of these are up to like 3,000 votes, 3,400 votes. 0 registered voters and the percent of voter turnout. This, by the way, these numbers here that have 0 registered voters, no data whatsoever that you could match against, let's say if you were doing some kind of canvassing, if you were doing some kind of actual recount, there'd be no way to actually check because there are 0 registered voters in the books. This totals up to around 173,000 voters. Again, look, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so this is their argument is, well, that's from the absentee ballots. Okay. We've made 2 calls to county boards and to people who were handling these elections, and we were not able to get through to anybody. It still doesn't give you any reason as to why they wouldn't have registered voters at all. Let's assume for a second that all these votes came in really quickly, like drinking from a fire hose. Well, it doesn't matter. You still have, long before election, registered voters. That's how they do the polls, right? The liberal polls were doing registered voters instead of doing likely voters. So that doesn't change the fact that that data shouldn't read 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, keep in mind that late on election night, in the middle of the night, there was a ballot dump with about 150,000 ballots, all for Biden. Less than 4%, about 3% took place for were actually cast for Donald Trump. That doesn't occur anywhere in nature. No. You could have an election in America's Communist Party and Donald Trump would get more than 3% of the vote. Furthermore, do you know what the average turnout rate would have to be for these absentee ballots? 100%.
Wow.
It would have to be 100% for these remaining votes, and they would all have to go to Biden. Assuming it would have to be more than 100% because if there's one vote that comes in that's higher than that's already 200% because it's 0. There are no registered voters and it all tipped. All the data that we do have available for us, which by the way, you should have in elections and most counties do. This is just a rule of Wayne County, by the way. But why don't you have registered voters? And how can we understand the voter turnout rate? We have 3 turnout rates right now, okay? We have Detroit, registered voters, about 15% turnout rate. We have everywhere else in Wayne County, deeply red, we have an over 80% turnout rate. And then we have a third turnout rate, which is NA, because 150,000 votes came in the middle of night from 0 registered voters.
Now, the Secretary of State tonight saying that by and large, the counting is done. It's been done in about 24 hours. She had previously said it might take as long as Friday, so Carolyn and Dave, at least this part of the drama is done.